Maybe this sounds familiar. You spend a long time creating a detailed plan with your coding agent. You explain what needs to be built. The agent implements the feature, writes the tests, runs a lovely code review loop, and declares that the work is done. Then you actually try it, and it does not behave the way you expected. This has happened to me enough times that I've started rejiggering my workflow and wanted to talk a little bit about that. And now I require the agent to run something called an acceptance test before it calls a feature done. The acceptance test forces me to clarify what I expect from the product. It then turns that expectation into like a real user flow the agent can run and verify before I review the pull request. So before we go further, what is an acceptance test? An acceptance test verifies that a feature delivers the outcome it was built to provide. It starts from the user's perspective. What should the user be able to do? What should happen as a result? What evidence would prove that the feature actually worked? So for example, for a new file upload feature for like a Slack agent, the acceptance test might be something like, when I post a message in Slack that attaches a file and I mention the agent, I can ask the agent to summarize the file and the agent can give a response summarizing the file with the information in the file. You can contrast this with something that I think coding agents are already really good at, which are unit and integration tests. Those tests in that scenario might be something like confirm that the upload handler accepts the file or that the file moves successfully through the system. Both can pass, even though the actual user outcome that you want isn't yet satisfied. That acceptance test adds the product perspective, defines what the feature should accomplish, and what a successful experience should really look like for the user. And I find it's helpful on both parts. One, I know that in the past, some of my continual review loops after an agent has done the work has been because I haven't given a great example of what done is and like what the end state is. Kind of thinking in terms of this like acceptance test, what's the core user flow? What does success look like? And really outlining that first and forcing myself to has definitely helped my loops. So how do you do that? Step one, you're going to define the behavior. Write down how the user should interact with the feature and what visible result would prove that it works. So really you're looking at a simple example, behavior, what the user can do, and success, what the user sees or experiences once it works. So again, for that file upload example that I just shared, behavior is a user attaches a file and asks that Slack agent to summarize it. And success is the agent responds with an accurate summary based on the file content. One thing is you're looking at success metrics. One, it's helpful for it to actually be binary. So fail, yes, no. Things like, is the agent response good, are hard for another agent to kind of evaluate, but they should be specific enough. So in my example, the agent replying when there is a file attached is not that useful. Asking the agent reply to verify something specific within the agent file is more useful because that actually demonstrates the full loop of the behavior. Then for step two, you're going to do something that I like to call choosing your runner. So once the behavior is clear, once success is clear, you're going to have to think through what tools your agent is going to need in order to verify the behavior. If you're working on a web app, for example, a tool you might need is like an agent browser. For me, in a lot of the Slack agents I build, I have like a development Slack that can trigger my agent to test things and then see the responses. You may need like a test email. Agentmail.to is a really great product for giving your agents email inboxes, and you can use that to verify things like login flows, email deliverability, sequences, whether things like that trigger, and then also things like payments, a database, file uploads, or scheduler. Basically, you want to think through the smallest setup that can really drive the real user flow, that your agent can almost simulate that user as well. Then for step three, that's when you've defined like the tools you need, you defined like the behavior. That's when you're going to create the test. And I actually do this before I even create the feature. I think it's actually the most important piece. Like I've started to put more energy into it than the actual development plan. But like, for example, I have like a Slack agent test and I just put them in skills just because I find them easy to run. And then if I'm making any other updates, I can just run a suite of skills. I can be like, hey, you made your changes. Let's just make sure this like Slack path still works. Let's make sure the file upload path still works. And you can kind of change them that way. And I have things like .env variables if they're necessary, run it, some scripts if they're pieces that need to be deterministic, and then some just like what needs to run and like the operating workflow for it. This is something that agents can also help you with, so long as you do a good job of defining like what does that end state look like for whatever you're building. And then once I've done that, then I actually go into the LFG loop by Compound Engineering. It's currently my favorite loop for building features. And what it does is it runs all of the brainstorm, plan, work, and review life cycles for the agent in one loop. And so you kind of have this like really robust implementation at the end. And then making sure that you have this like scale or really good acceptance test and you've spent a lot of time on that means that you can have better confidence that, or the actual what you intended to do and work actually works. And you can spend some time, if you so choose, more so like digging into the implementation. But what I've found is kind of doing this, really spending some time, really defining that end user journey has stopped me from having to have scenarios where I spent so much time building and then I go back and I check out the pull request and I run it on local and it's like, it does not work as I intended. So curious what your processes are for this. Drop a note in the comments.